Hey mama, you're listening to Coach the Mother, where postpartum recovery gets real, raw, and deeply rooted in who we are. I'm Dr. Natalie Forsell, a virtual pelvic floor PT, postpartum recovery coach, and a mama who's walked through grief, healing, and the long way back to herself. Around here, we're rewriting the outdated narratives around birth and the body. We're demystifying healing, reclaiming strength, and giving modern moms the wisdom they should have been given from the beginning. In this episode, we are talking about part 3 of why the 6-week checkup is failing us moms, and we are going to dig in a little more into some cultural practices around the world, wisdom that has been lost through generations, and how we can rebuild our village. I'm really excited to talk about this topic, and it also is kind of tough for me to think back on my early postpartum days. My oldest daughter, Madison, was born September of 2020, so I had a lot of time to prepare for this birth. I wasn't working at the time. I was attempting to finish my doctorate, but they benched me because of my pregnancy, and I couldn't finish my last clinical rotation. Just a lot of red tape around people who didn't want me to be in a clinic setting, I imagine, because they were worried about the unknowns and my safety. All that to say, it was a really slow time of life and really challenging for me. I read a lot of books. One of them that I read that I really loved was called The Fourth Trimester by Kimberly and Johnson. If you haven't heard of it, I love this book and I really recommend it. However, the entry point into reading this book was super hard because I was so isolated and alone at a baseline, like all of us were. On top of the fact that we don't live close to family, they're in other states, I did feel like I was coming into this birth and postpartum all alone with no support. And this whole book is about other countries who have all these beautiful practices around how they have these villages that support moms and all of these different rituals around caring for the mother. And I remember starting to read this book feeling like, well, crap, I don't have any of this, not even by a long shot. How am I going to survive giving birth to this baby? And just doing it on my own with my husband. After getting through the scaries of that, taking the book for what it was as a way to shine light on how we are not meant to do this part of motherhood alone and that we don't need to in our culture. There's so many barriers to taking care of ourselves as moms, but that doesn't mean that I am incapable of advocating for myself or building the type of support that I wish that I had. If we draw back to part 1 of this 3-part series of why the 6-week checkup is failing us, if you remember the timeline around when care changed in America from birthing outside of a hospital setting and more of a social and communal-based environment to a highly hospitalized birthing environment between the early 1900s to 1960, there was a big cultural shift in our country away from this communal type of care. So now us moms, we are often not living by family or support. We have little to no maternity leave. We have little to no referrals for other health professionals to support us in our postpartum journey, whether that's pelvic floor PT or mental health care or postpartum doulas. We are utterly and completely alone. And on top of that, I think about the generational gap of knowledge just experientially from my work as a pelvic floor PT. And I started my pelvic floor journey in a clinical setting that was mostly women over the age of 60, postmenopause. Their story was often the same. They'd come in with leaking that was getting worse. They were wearing pads and or diapers on a daily basis, and they finally figured out that there was a pelvic floor PT that could maybe help them. They were so skeptical because they had been leaking or dealing with incontinence since they gave birth 30, 40 years ago. When I started working with them, oftentimes these symptoms were relatively easily managed in a clinic setting by a pelvic floor physical therapist. By me, it would take them anywhere from 2 to 4 months to see near resolution or complete resolution of their symptoms that they've had for 30 to 40 years. And it was such a fun way to start my journey as a pelvic floor PT because they were so jazzed. It was the pelvic floor gospel. Once they found that they didn't have to deal with these leaking issues anymore, even though they were past menopause, literally almost every friend they had was dealing with the same stuff. They would shout it from the rooftops. They would tell all of their friends, Janet and Linda and Martha, that if they go see this pelvic floor PT, they won't leak anymore. And it was such a delight to see them feel liberated from this half of a lifetime of a problem that was really starting to bother them and had been bothering them for decades. So much fun. I say that because also being a millennial myself and having a parent who's a boomer and working with those women several years ago, you really get a sense of how much, if we feel like we have a hard time finding out information, women of those generations really had no information at all, zero resources, zero understanding that what they're feeling in their body is a problem and can be fixed. If we are looking to our elders, or whatever you want to call them, as we become mothers ourselves, the women that raised us are not really great, reliable resources on how to handle some of these problems, or they can give us this impending sense that this is my destiny. I will deal with these things. My mom has dealt with them, my aunt, my cousins, and it's just the way that it is. I've had so many stories where I talk to clients who they are so worried going into their first birth that they're going to have a lifelong prolapse because their mom has dealt with prolapse for so long. She never went to pelvic floor PT, but finally at the age of 60, her doctor decided to do surgery. And with no intervention at all, she dealt with symptoms for decades and then went in for a surgery. And she's like, I just don't want to end up like my mom. What can I do in pelvic floor PT right now before I even have a baby and after I have a baby to make sure that that's not me later? And how I'm thinking about this one client who kept encouraging her mother through all the things she was learning working with me, how much pelvic floor PT can help. She tried to coach her mother to get into work with a pelvic floor PT and she resisted. She just wanted to get the surgery done and they did. So there are these generational gaps of knowledge because we've come so far away from a social community around maternal health in general. All we get is this teeny tiny little 6-week checkup, and we are literally left floundering and Googling things at 2 a.m. while we're nursing our baby because we have no clue what's going on. Our friends don't have answers, our moms don't have answers, our OBs don't have answers, but you have this deep knowing of something just isn't right. In the fourth trimester by Kimberly and Johnson, she does paint a picture of different cultures around the world that still have beautiful rituals around postpartum care, the culture and the wisdom that's passed down, how much more supported moms must feel in those spaces. I will not attempt to say these rituals in their native language because I will butcher them, and I have been practicing with YouTube and it was kind of embarrassing, so I'm just not going to do it. But the Chinese culture has a traditional practice of what they call sitting the month. It emphasizes rest, a special diet, and avoiding certain activities during the first 40 days after childbirth. This is not a mom that is told to sit and do nothing in a vacuum. There is often support by family and friends. There are people making meals for this mother, checking in on the mother, taking care of any household tasks. That sounds amazing. It's something really hard and something that might feel really impossible in our lives in our Western American culture. In Latin America, they also have a very similar 40-day rest period with the similar type of assistance from family and friends focusing on the mother's healing. This also happens in Nordic traditions, in places like Brazil. This fourth trimester is treated just as that, a fourth stage of your maternal journey that has so much hands-on support and care, probably even more so than any of the prenatal support. I can imagine the implications that would have on our healing bodies if we had this true period of time to rest and recover and focus just on our own body and on our baby that we're nourishing in this newborn phase. If we didn't have to continue the daily load, feel rushed to get our body back, manage other children, other toddlers or older kids, if we didn't have to do the dishes, handle any laundry, how would that impact how we feel in our bodies and how we recover physically and emotionally from birth? I can imagine it's a whole lot better than what usually happens in our society right now. In the fourth trimester, Kimberly talks about creating a postpartum sanctuary, and that is something that you can take with you and try to replicate into your postpartum space. If we don't have these inbuilt community resources, how can you, in small, meaningful ways, build your own postpartum sanctuary? And what does that look like? Who can you invite to bring food? Who can watch the baby? Who can watch your older kids for chunks of time throughout the day? Who's helping you make sense of your new body and helping guide you toward healing? Some practical tips around how to build this village for yourself are to assign roles before you give birth. In some ways, we can do that already, whether it's through church communities or family and friends. Meal trains are super common, setting up ways to nourish the mother after you give birth so that nobody in the family has to cook. But sometimes we just leave it at that. And oftentimes in our day and age, we have so many friends and family that just opt to buy takeout food and not create home cooked meals anymore. More specifically than just starting a meal train, can you use some resources out there like the fourth trimester or other cultural practices and research what type of healing and nourishing meals are best for the postpartum body, and specifically ask for these meals to be made for you? Can you build a village of support around really fundamental practitioners that can help you heal, pelvic floor PT, mental health providers, or maybe even a doula to support you with some of these postpartum transitions, and have those people in place before you give birth? If you're like, this is super great, Dr. Natalie, but I am well past this early newborn phase and I still need help, but I missed the boat on all of these things for my first 40 days. Again, it's never too late to start tuning in and taking care of your body. It is the fourth trimester. Even if you're 1 year, even if you're 6 months, 12 months, 18 months postpartum, and you're just now starting to think about how you want to tune into your body and take care of it, start to build a little village around what you think you need, what that looks like. If you feel like the clouds have not parted and things are really dark and gloomy for you still, and you thought that that would change by now, go find a mental health provider. If you're still dealing with back pain, hip pain, low back pain, leaking, even if it's just occasionally with a sneeze, or your core still feels really weak, or you never lost the baby weight, talk to me. I'm a virtual coach. I can work with anyone in the country, and we can give you everything that you need to do from home without clinic visits, without commutes, with very minimal equipment to start feeling better today. I think we've made it pretty clear by now that this 6-week checkup is not a healing plan. It is not a green light into the abyss to do whatever you want to do. If you have been to a 6-week checkup, you probably know and remember very deeply how you've been cleared to do things like have sex, and you're like, oh my gosh, that feels so far away and I feel so unready to do that. We've broken down the history of why the 6-week checkup exists and why it's bogus anyways. We've talked about how the US is one of the worst countries out of all the high-income countries in comparison about maternal health and postpartum care in general. And now talking about how in our culture we have this big rupture and loss of generational wisdom. We have little to no rituals around our postpartum care. So it's on us to talk about it and to make a plan about how we want to rebuild our village and change this narrative around how we heal and take care of ourselves as moms. This is why I built the Postpartum Recovery Program. It is a 4-month program that takes you through my 4-phase recovery system that I built through a lot of research and my own personal experience as a mom. This Postpartum Recovery Program is meant to be easy enough to plug in to your everyday mom life so you are more successful and you have more support than you would in a clinic setting. The foundation of this program is based in movement. You get weekly workouts plus a custom recovery toolkit based on your body. What we have found together are your top concerns and how to get you from pain, weakness, and feeling insecure in your body to feeling strong, confident, and sexy again, to show up in motherhood the way you really want to. If you're anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 years postpartum and you are ready to finally tune into your body and take care of yourself, you can learn more and apply to the Postpartum Recovery Program at www.newnativecoaching.com. The website is in the show notes below. And I'm so grateful you've tuned in with me today for Coach Smother. I can't wait to chat with you next week.